This past Saturday in Kansas City, the widely disliked Ian Machado Garry fought one of the scariest knockout artists in the welterweight division. Carlos Prates burst into the UFC with 4 straight devastating knockout victories. Despite this, Ian Garry was extremely confident that he would not only defeat Prates, but dominate him. How could he be so confident in the face of such a dangerous knockout threat? Well, other than the fact that Garry is a pretty brash, outspoken character, maybe he knew a little something about how to beat a knockout artist. Active offense. Usually, fighters who are big knockout threats tend to have lower output. Whether it's because they are conserving their energy or trying to find their shot, they don't have the same mindset that a volume striker has. A volume striker wants to find shots that will land, while a knockout striker wants to find shots that will knock out their opponent. Though some knockout strikers understand that not every strike should be thrown with knockout intentions, they still are more likely to wait to find the perfect shot. So as an opponent, while they are waiting, you must get ahead on the numbers. You don't win rounds by looking the most intimidating or almost landing the knockout shot. You win rounds by landing shots. Ian Garry got to work immediately with a variety of attacks to all targets. Variety is an extremely important part of being successful when volume striking. If you throw the same few strikes over and over, it allows your opponent to read what is coming and counter accordingly. Mixing up both the technique and target of your attacks will keep your opponent guessing and force them on the defensive. Since the knockout striker mindset is already programmed to wait to find the perfect shot, with an active and varied arsenal of strikes, you can put them in long defensive cycles where they are not launching those knockout threats your way. Garry did this beautifully through the first 3 rounds, where he threw more than 2 times the amount of strikes that Prates did. Weapon management. The second key to defeating a knockout threat is managing their weapons. To effectively manage our opponent's weapons, we must first determine which of their weapons are the most dangerous. Unfortunately, in hand-to-hand combat, the human body is unable to defend every part of the body. When you focus on defending low kicks with a shorter, more squared stance, you leave yourself more susceptible to teeps. Everything in martial arts has a give and a take, so we must understand where our opponent is strongest and put our focus on defending against that. In Ian Garry's case, Prates has a few extremely dangerous weapons. I've listed them, ranking them in order of what I feel is the most dangerous, starting with his left hand, then his left knee, and then his right hand. With that understanding, let's start at the top. How can Garry manage Prates' left hand? Given the skill set that Garry possesses, he chose to use his right kick to occupy Prates' left hand. The concept here is that when Garry, the orthodox fighter, kicks Prates, the southpaw fighter, the primary way of defending the open side body kick is blocking with your rear arm. Since Prates has to use that left arm to defend against the kick, he can't use it offensively. With Garry throwing that right kick often, it is in Prates' mind that he should be keeping his left arm in a defensive position rather than an offensive one. Another benefit that Garry's rear kick presents is actually damaging the arm. Even if the kicks are not landing on the body or the head, Prates has to use his power arm to block, and depending on how hard the kick lands, it could break the arm, wrist, or hand, and even if the damage is not that severe, it can swell up the forearms and shoulders, which lead to a slower and less threatening power hand. With a plan for managing the left hand in place, let's move on to his second most dangerous weapon, the left knee. Since Garry was planning to mix wrestling into his game plan, he had to avoid ducking onto that devastating knee. He ensured this wouldn't happen by shooting practically all of his takedowns with his head on the outside of Prates' lead leg. This is a concept which a lot of Dagestani fighters follow. They understand that the most dangerous strikes can interrupt the path of a takedown when your head is on the inside. Think of Masvidal versus Askren, Lewis versus Blades, and Dariush versus Barboza. All of those knockouts came from intercepting strikes when a head inside takedown was attempted. Now for managing his right hand, which can serve as both a setup to his very dangerous left hand, but also a counter right hook. Garry managed Prates' lead hand throughout the fight with a very common concept: hand fighting. Garry dominated the lead hand battle, and in doing so, effectively shut down Prates' main way of setting up that lethal left hand. With smart, strategic plans to manage all of Prates' most dangerous weapons, Garry was able to nullify a lot of the knockout striker's knockout threat. Space management. This is a concept which is often referred to as ring generalship in boxing. Managing the space where the fight is taking place is probably the most important part of beating a knockout artist. To manage the space correctly, we must determine which space our opponent is most dangerous in. When looking at the majority of Prates' knockouts, the answer becomes very clear. As it is for most knockout threats like Ilia Topuria and Jack Della Maddalena, where Prates is most dangerous is when he has his opponent backed up against the cage. With that in mind, Garry knew he had to keep this fight in the center of the octagon, where he could move back freely and not be in the danger zone. While stay off the cage wall is good advice, it is way easier said than done. It requires good footwork, spatial awareness, and timing to stay off of the cage wall, especially against a solid cage cutter. Garry used a variety of good tactics to stay in the center of the octagon, such as lateral exits, weak side circling, takedowns, weapons to counter forward pressure like teeps, stomps, and straight punches, as well as blitzing combinations. With all of those smart tactics employed, Garry was still almost finished in the later rounds. A knockout artist will always be a difficult task to solve. As one of the great knockout threats in boxing, Deontay Wilder once said,
have to be perfect for 12 rounds, don't have to be perfect for 2 seconds because of the power that I displayed.
When you give the knockout threat 12 rounds, or in this case 25 minutes, it is difficult to be perfect that entire time. So along with these 3 tactics, finishing a knockout threat as soon as possible is also a pretty good idea.